The geography of Switzerland encompasses the geographical features of Switzerland, a mountainous and landlocked country located in Western and Central Europe. It is surrounded by 5 countries, Austria and Liechtenstein to the east, France to the west, Italy to the south and Germany to the north. Switzerland has a maximum north-south length of 220 kilometers and an east-west length of about 350 kilometers. Switzerland is well known for the Alps in the south and southeast. North of the Alps, the Swiss Plateau runs along the east-west axis of the country. Most of the population of Switzerland lives on the rolling hills and plains of the plateau. The smaller Jura Mountains are located on the northwest side of the plateau. Much of the northern border with Germany follows the Rhine River, though the Rhine enters Switzerland near Schaffhausen. The eastern border with Germany and a portion of Austria is drawn through Lake Constance. A portion of the southwest border with France is drawn through Lake Geneva. Switzerland is divided into 26 sovereign cantons. The cantons along the Swiss Plateau tend to be the most populous, industrial and religiously Protestant. The cantons in the Alps tend to be less populous, Catholic, and have an agrarian or tourism-based economy. Switzerland is also divided by language. There are 4 official languages. German 63.7% of population, French 20.4% of population, Italian 6.5% of population and Romansh 0.5% of population. From Bern east the population generally speaks German. West of Bern, the population generally speaks French. In the southern canton of Ticino, most people speak Italian. Romansh, a group of dialects descended from Vulgar Latin, is spoken in several regions in the canton of Grauburg-Courtenden. Physical description. Switzerland extends between the parallels 45°4905 and 47°4830 lat and the meridians 5°5723 and 10°2931 long. It forms an irregular quadrilateral, of which the greatest length from east to west is 350 kilometers, and the greatest breadth from north to south is nearly 220 kilometers. Switzerland is a landlocked country, the closest coastline being at the Gulf of Genoa, 160 kilometers south of Chiasso. Its political boundaries often do not coincide with those of nature. The entire canton of Ticino is south of the Alps, as are the valleys of Simplon, Messico, Bregaglia, Puievo and Mar 1/4 Stare. The whole canton of Schaffhausen and part of that of Basel are north of the Rhine, while a large part of Grauburg-Courtenden lies to the east of the Rhine basin, and Porrentruy is far down on the western slope of the Jura. Putting these exceptional cases aside, the physical geography of Switzerland may thus be described: on the south runs the main chain of the Alps which is joined, at Mont Dolent near Martigny, by the lower ranges that rise south of Lake Geneva, and which continues partly Swiss till close to Pislade on the east. To the north of this main chain there is another great range of mountains only slightly inferior in extent and height, which starts from the hills known as the Jura Range above Lausanne, and culminates in the great snowy summits of the Bernese Alps and of the Tar paragraph D group, before trending to the north near Chur, and, after rising once more in the Saar currency NTIS group, dies away on the southern shore of Lake Constance. The Swiss portion of the main chain of the Alps and the Great Northern Outlier run parallel to each other from Martigny to near Chur, while for a short distance they actually unite near Pizzo Rotondo, parting again near the Oberalp Pass. Between these two great snow-clad ranges flow 2 of the mightiest European rivers, the Rhône towards the west and the Rhine towards the east, their headwaters being only separated by the tangled mountain mass between Pizzo Rotondo and the Oberalp Pass, which sends the Reuss towards the north and the Ticino towards the south. To the north of the Great Northern Outlier rises the Jura Range, a huge spur of the Alps, while between the Northern Outlier and the Jura extends what may be called the plains or plateau of Switzerland, consisting all but wholly of the undulating valley of the Our with its numerous affluents. To that river valley, the valley of the Thumb, that lies between the Our basin and the Rhine basin must be added. Putting aside the valleys of the Ticino and Inn, Switzerland may thus be described as consisting of 3 great river valleys with the smaller one of the Thumb, which all lie to the north of the main chain of the Alps and include the region between the Alps and the Jura. If matters are examined more carefully, it can be noted that the Rhône and Rhine valleys are shut off from that of the Aube by the great northern outlier of the Alps, which consists of the Bernese and Glorous Alps. Two wide and undulating valleys and two deeply cut trenches thus lie on the northern slope of the Alps, to the north and south respectively of the great northern outlier of the Alps. The main chain of the Alps rises in Swiss territory to the height of 4,634 meters in the loftiest summit or Fußspitze of Monte Rosa, though the Dom, in the Mischabel range, is the highest mountain mass which is entirely within Switzerland. The Great Northern Outlier attains a height of 4,274 meters in the Finsteraarhorn, while the lowest level, within the Confederation, is on Lake Maggiore. The highest permanently inhabited village in Switzerland is Geneva, at the head of the Avers Valley, while the lowest is Ascona, on Lake Maggiore. Geology. Different geological phenomena shaped the actual landscapes of Switzerland. The alpine orogeny had the most visible consequences nowadays. This term designates the entire geological movements that conducted to the formation of the Alps. A crystalline basement formed at the beginning of the Paleozoic era, between 540 and 360 million years ago. Later, between 205 and 96 million years ago, the Alpine Ocean or Tethys Ocean formed between Eurasia and Africa. The ocean reached its maximum width at the end of Jurassic period, 135 million years ago. The collision between the Eurasian and African plates made it progressively disappear. This plate collision, still in progress, began 100 million years ago. The Alpine chain resulted from this geological movement, the two plates creating folding zones. The Central Plateau is mainly composed of molasse, a sedimentary rock which formed at the bottom of the old ocean. Switzerland is situated on a relatively quiet tectonic zone, although the city of Basel was completely destroyed in 1356 by an earthquake, the largest historical seismic event in Central Europe. The most active regions are precisely the Rhine Rift Valley and the Valais. Physiographic divisions. Switzerland is divided in three main geographic regions: the Swiss Alps, the Central Plateau and the Jura. They correspond each to clearly different geological realities. However, two small regions are not part of those three. The first, north of the Rhine in the Basel area, is situated beyond the Jura. The second, on the south in the Mendrisio area, is located in the Po Valley. But these two territories are not extended in comparison to the total area of the country. The Swiss Alps occupy the southern part of Switzerland. They were formed by the thrust of the African plate, which also caused the formation of the Jura in the northeast and the plateau between the two massifs. In terms of area, the Alps constitute about 60% of the country, the plateau 30% and the Jura 10%. The rugged terrain of the Jura and the Alps are very sparsely populated, except for some large valleys such as the Valais. Most of the population lives on the plateau where the country's major cities such as Geneva, Zurich and Bern are located. Central Plateau equals. The Swiss Plateau extends from Lake Geneva on the French border across central Switzerland to Lake Constance on the German and Austrian borders. In the north and northwest, the Swiss Plateau is sharply delimited geographically and geologically by the Jura Mountains. In the south, there is no clear border with the Alps. Usually, the rising of the terrain to altitudes above 1,500 meters, which is very abrupt in certain places, is taken as a criterion for delimitation. The plateau has an average altitude of 580 meters. Even though the Swiss Plateau forms a basin, it is by no means a flat territory and it is covered with rolling hills, lakes and rivers. Most of Switzerland's large lakes are located in the plateau. Both Lake Geneva, and Lake Constance, are located in the plateau but are shared with other countries. The largest lake totally in Switzerland, Lake Neutra-Saint-Telephone, is located in the Swiss Plateau. The Swiss Plateau is crossed by three great river valleys and a small Ether Valley. While the headwaters of these four rivers all lie in the Alps, they all cut across the plateau between the Alps and the Jura Mountains. Near Schaffhausen the Rhine passes through the Rhine Falls, Europe's largest waterfall. The Rhine Falls are 150 meters wide and 25 meters. The plateau occupies about one-third of the land area of Switzerland, and about two-thirds of the population live in this area. The population density on the plateau averages about 450 people per km². In the regions around Lake Geneva, Lake Zurich and other cities, the population density exceeds 1,000 people per km². As well as a majority of the population, the Swiss Plateau is also home to the majority of industry, manufacturing and farming in Switzerland. The farms are generally small and very organized. Most farms include small meadows alternating with fields with a variety of crops and small wooded areas. Alps. The Swiss Alps form part of a chain of mountains that stretch across southern Europe and isolate northern Europe from the Mediterranean Sea. Several important passes through the Alps are located in Switzerland, and control of the passes has been important throughout Switzerland's history. The Alps have an average altitude of 1,700 meters and cover nearly two-thirds of the total surface area. Within the Alps there are 48 mountains that are 4,000 meters or higher. The Alps are the watershed of Western Europe. The Rhine River, together with its tributaries the Ahr River and the Thar River, drain about two-thirds of the water into the North Sea. The Rhone and the Ticino drain about 18% of the water into the Mediterranean Sea. The Inn, which flows into the Danube outside of Switzerland, drains about 4.4% of the water into the Black Sea. The Swiss Alps also contain many of Central Europe's glaciers. There are about 1,800 glaciers which cover 1,200 square kilometers of the total glaciated area of the Alps. The Alps are a popular tourist destination and are one of the most recognizable symbols of Switzerland. The tallest point in Switzerland, Monte Rosa, in Canton Valais, is located in the Alps as is tallest mountain wholly in Switzerland, the Dom. One of the most recognizable symbols of Switzerland, the Matterhorn, is also located in the Alps. The Matterhorn is the seventh highest peak in the Swiss Alps and is the most photographed mountain in Switzerland. The tallest mountain in the northern outlier or Bernese Alps is the Finsteraarhorn. Switzerland encompasses a significant portion of the south side of the Alps. Most of it is constituted by the canton of Ticino, almost reaching the plains of the Po and including Switzerland's lowest point on Lake Maggiore. The canton of Grauben-Quartenden is also partially located on the south side of the Alps with the four valleys of Misux, Bregaglia, Puievo and Mar-1/4 Finally, the canton of Valais comprises the upper Divrier Valley, located south of the Simplon Pass. Jura. The Jura is a limestone range running from Lake Geneva to the Rhine River. This area makes up about 12% of Switzerland's land area. Located about 700 meters above sea level, this region is characterized by a limestone highland with deep river valleys. The limestone rock in the Jura is a Jurassic period rock with numerous fossils and dinosaur tracks. The name Jurassic actually refers to the Jura region where these fossils were studied at the end of the 18th century. The Jura is considered one of the most important sites for dinosaur footprints in the world. In one area near the village of Corted, over 13,000 footprints were discovered in between 2002 and 2011. The range is being continually built up and decreasing in width by mountain building, accommodating the compression from alpine folding as the main alpine orogenic front moves roughly northwards. The deformation becomes less pervasive away from the younger, more active alpine mountain building. Structurally, the Jura consists of a sequence of folds, the formation of which is facilitated by an evaporitic decalment layer. The box folds are still relatively young, and this is evident in that they define the shape of the overlying landscape, meaning that they have not existed long enough to experience erosion and thus are evidence of recent mountain building. The folds comprise three major bands of building evidence dated roughly by era: the Malm, Dogger, and Liers. Each era of folding represents effects on a previously shallow marine environment as evidenced by beds with particular carbonate sequences, containing abundant bioclasts and oolitic divisions between layers. The Jura Mountains rise in Swiss territory to a height of 1,679 meters at Montender. Other high summits are La Dala, the Chasseron, and the Chasseral, all located in the western part of the range, in the cantons of Vaud, Neuchâtel and Bern. Hydrology. Switzerland has 6% of all freshwater reserves in Europe. The country shares 5 river basins and some of the largest lakes in Western Europe with its neighbours. It is the source of several major European rivers that ultimately flow into the North Sea, into the Mediterranean Sea, into the Black Sea and into the Adriatic Sea. Most of the great Swiss rivers, being in their origin mere mountain torrents, tend to overflow their banks, and hence much has been done to prevent this by embanking them, and regaining arable land from them. So the Rhine, the Rhone, the Aar, the Reuss, and in particular the great work on the Linth carried out by Hans Conrad Escher, who earned by his success the surname of von der Linth, and on the Tschechel near the lakes of Neutra Sental and Biel, while the diversion of the Kander from its junction with the Ottawa Channel by which it flows into Lake Thun was effected as early as 1714. Switzerland has considerable reserves of groundwater and a large number of lakes, large and small, can be found in most areas. The two most extensive, those of Geneva and of Constance, balance each other, as it were, at the southwest and northeast corners of the land. But neither of these is wholly Swiss, this distinction being claimed by the next in size, that of Neutra Sental, Lake Maggiore coming next in the list, and being followed by the wholly Swiss lakes of Lucerne and of Zurich. Then come Lake Lugano, Lake Thun, Lake Biel, Lake Zug, Lake Brienz, Lake Wallenstadt and Lake Merten. These 13 only are over 20 kilometers to an extent. 10 of them are in the Rhine basin, 2 in that of the Po, and 1 in that of the Rhone. There are no large lakes in the Swiss portion of the Inn basin, the most extensive being that of Sils. Smaller alpine lakes such as the Oestchinnensee are innumerable, and often constitute popular tourist destination. Since the 20th century a large number of dams have been built in the Alps and elsewhere, resulting in many artificial lakes. The largest are the Silsee and the Lake of Gruyere, both approximately 10 kilometers to an extent. Also notable is Lac des Dix, withheld by the Grand Axence, the tallest gravity dam in the world. In total, lakes and reservoirs contain 50% of the stored water, glaciers 28%, groundwater 20% and rivers 2%. Climate. In Switzerland, where the height above sea level ranges from 193 to 4,634 meters, many climates are naturally found, from the regions of olives, vines, oaks and beeches, pines and firs, to those of the high mountain pastures, rhododendrons, and of eternal snow. In most inhabited regions of Switzerland, at lower altitudes, the weather is generally moderate. On the plateau, freezing temperatures generally occur during December-early March with an average temperature of 9 degrees Celsius for elevations between 500 to 600 meters. On the plateau the average precipitation is 1,000 millimeters with a range of about 800 to 1,300 millimeters. The higher elevations of the Jura and the Alps naturally cause lower temperatures, and in the high Alps glaciers exist. The Jura and foothills typically have more precipitation, with an average of 1,200 to 1,600 millimeters, while the high Alps may have over 2,500 millimeters. Ticino, on the south side of the Alps, has subtropical vegetation and is usually 2 to 4 degrees Celsius warmer, and wetter than the Swiss Plateau. In the CAR paragraph PPEN climate classification, the Swiss Plateau is classed as maritime temperate or oceanic climate and the Alps are considered tundra climates or. A maritime temperate area will have changeable, often overcast weather. Summers are cool due to cloud cover and winters are milder than expected due to latitude. The Jura will be slightly cooler due to higher altitude. Within the Alps, temperatures and snowfall correlate to altitude. Climatic diversity. Political divisions and greater regions. As a federal state, Switzerland is composed of 26 cantons, which are further divided into districts and municipalities. Each canton was a fully sovereign state with its own borders, army and currency from the Treaty of Westphalia until the establishment of the Swiss federal state in 1848. There are considerable differences between the individual cantons, most particularly in terms of population and geographical area. Hence 7 larger and more homogeneous regions have been defined. They do not, however, constitute administrative units and are mostly used for statistical and economical purposes. Land use. The Swiss territory is divided into four major types of land use. As of 2001, 36.9% of the land in Switzerland was used for farming. 30.8% of the country is covered with forests and woodlands, with an additional 6.8% covered with houses or buildings. About one-fourth of the country is either mountains, lakes or rivers and is categorized as unproductive. Surfaces of housing and infrastructure. The habitat is mainly developed in the Swiss Plateau and the northern slopes of the Alps, near lakes and along major rivers. It occupies 14.6% of the plateau, the Jura, the southern and the northern Alps, and finally the western central Alps and eastern Alps. Habitat areas and infrastructure grow around the urban areas but also in the countryside, at the expense of agricultural land. This growth, called suburbanization, is particularly pronounced along the main transport routes such as motorways and railways. New roads lead to a significant increase in construction activity in the affected regions. Many people who work in the city prefer to live in the countryside to take advantage of cheaper land and better quality of life. This is also reflected in the construction statistics. Single-family homes arise mainly in rural areas, multi-family homes in the cities. Household structures are also evolving and tend to become smaller. In 12 years, the area devoted to housing increased by 25% while the increase of the population was only 9%. Farmland. Although it is declining, agriculture represents the most important use of the territory in Switzerland. Farmland dominates the plateau, occupying just over half of the area. The situation is similar in the Jura, on the northern slopes of the Alps and in the eastern central Alps. In the mountainous regions of the western central Alps and in the south, the agricultural areas are proportionately lower. In 1993 it was estimated that 250 square kilometers of the entire country was irrigated, meaning that most Swiss farms receive enough rainfall to grow. The protection of forested areas led to numerous conflicts of interests around the farmland, especially on the plateau and near urban areas where the habitat area development and infrastructure tend to reduce the amount of arable land. Conversely, the number of farms in the mountains tend to decrease. Many areas are left for the benefit of woodlands to the detriment of landscape diversity. This decline is particularly marked in Valais and Ticino. Forests cover less than a third of the territory, but the area is increasing year by year. The reforestation is essentially natural, mainly in the Alps where the forest areas reoccupy those abandoned by farmers. Afforestation contributes 13% to reforestation, and is conducted for compensation following a clearance or to provide protection against natural hazards in the mountainous areas. Forests are more predominant in the Jura and in the southern Alps, occupying respectively 47.7% and 47.2% of the soil in these regions. On the northern slopes of the Alps, alpine forest occupy 33.2% and on the plateau 24.6%. It is in the central Alps that forest areas occupy less floor with about 22% coverage. Unproductive areas. The unproductive areas correspond to all areas occupied by rocks, boulders, ice, snowfields and unproductive vegetation beyond the limits of forest. Lakes, rivers and wetlands are also unproductive areas. Occupying 25.5% of Swiss soil, these surfaces are in very slight decline. They are predominant in the Central Alps. On the contrary, they only cover 10% of the surface of the plateau and 1% of the Swiss Jura. The uncultivated mountain areas are exploited by the tourism and the production of hydroelectricity. Climatic conditions strongly affect the landscape of these areas: water seepage, landslides, avalanches, torrents in spate. Man intervenes on 0.2% of this surface area to create infrastructure protecting against floods or avalanches. The channels of communication, with many works of art, occupy a portion of these surfaces. In the plains, lakes and streams near areas of habitat are used for recreation and relaxation. Habitats, damp or dry, and nature reserves are managed, and these areas contribute to maintain biodiversity. Population. The population of Switzerland is heavily urbanized. In 2009, 74% of the 7,785,800 inhabitants lived in urban areas. The distribution of population is shaped by the topography of the country, the plateau being the most populous area and including the major cities of Switzerland. With a population density of 450 inhabitants per km², it is one of the most densely populated regions in Europe. There are large disparities of population densities between the cantons lying in the plateau and those lying in the Alps. Thus, the population densities of the cantons of Lucerne, Solothurn and Zurich are respectively 261.0, 319.7 and 813.6 inhabitants per km². On the other hand, the cantons of Uri and Graubünden and Den are experiencing very low population densities, respectively 33.4 and 27.0 inhabitants per km². In the southern Alps, the canton of Ticino is also experiencing a population density less than the national average, with 122.5 against 194.7 inhab km². Environment. With the delicate alpine and glacial environments making up a significant portion of the country and providing a major industry, Switzerland has been concerned with environmental issues. Some of the main issues are listed below. Air. The main environmental issues in Switzerland's air is air pollution from vehicle emissions and open-air burning as well as acid rain. In 2004, the average amount of carbon dioxide emission per resident was 6 tons and in 2005 was 6.2 tons. With these numbers, Switzerland is 31st to 33rd among the 45 nations listed by United Nations Millennium Development Goals indicators as developed nations and 69th worldwide. Switzerland expects by 2010 to reduce their total greenhouse gas emissions by 8% to 10% over emissions in 1990. The population uses 3.76 ton of oil equivalent per person per year, of which 43.7% comes from petroleum and 19% from nuclear power. Water. The major water issue in Switzerland is water pollution from the increased use of agricultural fertilizers as well as hydrocarbon pollution from transport and industry. While improvements have been made, there are still issues with eutrophication in many lakes in the Swiss Plateau. The total renewable water resources of Switzerland, as of 2005, is 53.3 kilometres 3. Of which the total freshwater withdrawal is 2.5 kilometres 3 per year. This breaks down to a per capita freshwater withdrawal of 348 m3 per year. Of that water, 24% is used for in households, 74% in industry and only 2% is used for agriculture. Biodiversity. Switzerland is facing a loss of biodiversity. While the country is quite small, the wide range of climates allow a variety of organisms to flourish. There are about 50,000 animal and plant species living in Switzerland. While most species that live on north and south foothills of the Alps are generally doing well, the Swiss Plateau is seeing a decrease in many species. The pressure from city and agricultural growth is reducing or eliminating the habitat of many species that once flourished along the plateau. There are about 60 species that are considered endangered that live in Switzerland. To help offset this, 28.6% of the country is set aside as a protected natural area. International agreements. Party to air pollution nitrogen oxides, air pollution sulfur 85, air pollution sulfur 94, air pollution volatile organic compounds, air pollution persistent organic pollutants, Antarctic Treaty, biodiversity, climate change, desertification, endangered species, environmental modification, hazardous wastes, marine dumping, marine life conservation, nuclear test ban, ozone layer protection, ship pollution, tropical timber 83, tropical timber 94, wetlands, whaling, signed, but not ratified, Antarctic Environmental Protocol, climate change Kyoto Protocol, law of the sea. Area and boundaries. The borders of Switzerland are those established with the original formation of the Helvetic Republic in 1798, with the accession of Valais and Grisons, and the incorporation of various remaining feudal territories such as the county of Neuchâtel, Prince-Bishopric of Basel, Abbey of St. Gall, etc. The cantons mostly had their current borders since 1815, with the exception of the secession of Jura from Bern in 1979. The total length of the border is 1,899 kilometers, enclosing an area of 41,290 kilometers to water, 1,520 kilometers to elevation extremes. Lowest point, Lake Maggiore, 193 m. Highest point, Monte Rosa, 4,634 m. Deepest point, in Lake Maggiore, a 79 m. See also, extreme points of Switzerland. Western or Central Europe. There is no universally accepted subdivision of Europe, and the issue how to name the different European regions and define the borders between them is subject to debates. Depending on the definition chosen, Switzerland can be either part of Western or Central Europe, both concepts being context-dependent and carrying cultural, economical and political connotations. The term Western Europe commonly indicates the region west of the Baltic and Adriatic Sea. Countries described as Western European are invariably high-income developed countries, characterized by stable democratic political systems, mixed economies combining the free market with aspects of the welfare state. On the other hand, the term Central Europe refers to the region between Western and Eastern Europe. Central European countries show high disparities with regard to income but possibly share similar cultural characteristics. The concept came back into use by the end of the Cold War, which had divided Europe politically into the Western world and the East Bloc, splitting Central Europe in half. Before World War I, in the German-speaking world, the term Mitteleuropa was used to refer to an area larger than most conceptions of Central Europe, encompassing Switzerland and the other German-speaking countries. Physically, Switzerland is situated approximately in the middle of the portion of Europe west of the Carpathian Mountains. Defining the Ural Mountains as the eastern limit of the continent, Switzerland is located within the western third of Europe, approximately 15 degrees of longitude away from the extreme west and 50 degrees away from extreme east. Phytogeographically, the part of Switzerland that lies north of the Alps belongs to Central Europe, while the part south of the Alps belongs to Southern Europe. Natural World Heritage Sites. Topography. See also, Geography of the Alps, Swiss Cartography, Valleys of the Alps, Little Switzerland, Swiss Federal Office of Topography. Notes and references. Notes References External links, CIA World Factbook, Geography of Switzerland, Official online maps of Switzerland.